Prime Minister Justin Trudeau campaigned on removing our CF-18 fighter jets from the Middle East. That proved to be easier said than done. What should our role in the Middle East be? And with that, we welcome a couple of familiar faces to our viewers. Stein and Studin, Janice Stein, founding director of the Munk School of Global Affairs at U of T, and Irvin Studin, president of the Institute for 21st Century Questions and editor-in-chief and publisher of Global Brief magazine. Welcome, you two.
Nice to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Janice, start off here. Are we, in your view, breaking our word to our coalition partners by unilaterally deciding, as Mr. Trudeau has done, that our bombing missions of ISIS targets is over?
No, I do not think we are breaking our word. Prime Minister has made it clear that although we are withdrawing the 6 combat aircraft, and that was a campaign commitment, we will participate actively in the coalition against ISIS. And in fact, we will step up our role. What will be interesting to watch here, Steve, is it a non-combat role, as he has specified in the campaign? And if it is a non-combat role, will that satisfy a very determined Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, who said in the U.S., who said absolutely directly, I will call on every one of my allies to step up, and we cannot tolerate free riders. This has to be a robust commitment to substitute for those planes that are coming home.
But essentially, you say we're not breaking our word by changing this.
I say we are not breaking our word.
Irvin, are we breaking our word by deciding not to bomb ISIS targets any further?
Well, Steve, first of all, congratulations on putting together this wonderful panel, and congratulations on new set, and it's terrific to do it with Janice, whom I greatly admire. We're not breaking our word, but it's a very disappointing move. I speak strictly from a nonpartisan perspective as an analyst, cheering for the success of the new Prime Minister and the new government. It's a young government. It's a wrong first step in the following sense. Janice takes a very American-centric view of the international affairs universe. Let me take a slightly broader view, which is to say there are 2 major conflicts in the world today. One is the Russia-Western conflict, starting over Ukraine, but broadening to other theaters. The other one is the general collapse of the Middle East. What we have in the context of Syria bombardment is a unification of these 2 conflicts. Now, Canada has put itself into a corner of irrelevance on the first conflict, in the Russia-West conflict. And now we're putting ourselves into a corner of complete irrelevance on the second one. We have a dog in neither fight. In the first context,
us to be more relevant?
We have a duty to be relevant internationally. We have an interest nationally to shape some of these theaters. In both cases, unfortunately, in the first case of irrelevance under the last government, we were speaking to a domestic constituency. The current move, again, is an electoral move which speaks to a domestic constituency, but it, again, redounds to our general detriment. In the first context of the Russia-West conflict, we've got the Minsk process led by France and Germany. Canada should have been there. In my view, we could have been one of the leaders. We had a lot to offer. The next conflict is led by the Vienna process. Almost all the countries that are bombarding various interests in Syria are part of that. Canada could have had a dog in that fight, could have had a role in shaping that universe, or we've made ourselves irrelevant.
Okay, the allegation is we are rendering us irrelevant.
Yeah, well, I don't agree. I do not think that we're irrelevant in this, in the larger context of the Middle East. It is not necessary to bomb to be relevant. And I think that's a very important part. There are many different ways that Canada can contribute to the fight against ISIS. Let me give you one concrete example. It's entirely possible that this government will decide to commit troops in a serious way to the Sahel area in Africa, where the Islamic State is expanding out of Libya. It may well join with the French government that has troops in 5 African countries.
You think Canada is going to put boots on the ground?
I think that Canada may well put some forces on the ground in an area which is being neglected and which will be very important as ISIS is pushed out of Iraq and Syria and is now already moving some of its fighters into Libya. And Libya is, as the French president says, the autoroute for fighters to go down and destabilize Mali, Burkina Faso, where 5 Canadians were killed yesterday.
I have to follow up on this. If we're not prepared to put 6 planes in the sky over IS, What makes you think we're going to put any boots on the ground over there?
Well, we already have boots on the ground. We have 69 pairs of boots right now who are training Peshmerga Kurdish forces. It's entirely conceivable that the government, and it said we are going to enhance our training. That's got to mean more boots.
And is that relevant? Would that be considered relevant?
I think that the coalition would be absolutely delighted to see an area where everybody is now very concerned about what's happening in Libya, where the Islamic State is consolidating new bases along a 150-mile stretch of coast. That would be the heart of relevance.
Would this be considered a relevant?
There are enough planes in the sky over Syria.
Is that a relevant contribution in your view, if we were to do that?
It's possible. It's highly unlikely. So I think Janice might be overstating the probability of this action. But let me just emphasize that bombing is not relevance. I agree with that. What is relevant is assets. We have no assets, either diplomatic or military, in the Russia-Western conflict. We have no diplomatic assets in the Middle Eastern conflict. We've withdrawn all our military assets. What have we to offer? The point is, if we look at the diplomatic instrument, which reigns in the Vienna process, we have no relationships with Iran. We have no relationship with Syria. We have no relationship in Libya. We have no relationship in Iraq. And we have consulates in a number of key states in the Middle East where we should have embassies. We have very little intelligence, so as a result, we end up quoting American secretaries of state to the detriment of our national interest and our national imagination. We had small assets in the coalition. We've withdrawn them. What we should have done, if we were a little bit more imaginative, a little bit more bold, was to insert and then expand, to insert ourselves in the process that will form that region to our interest.
Well, I'm dubious. I'm really dubious about the success of the Vienna Conference. This is a so-called peace conference.
Can you give us 30 seconds of background on that? Who's there and what are they doing?
Well, that's a good question. Who's there? Who's there? The Iranians are there, the Saudis are there, the Russians are there, the Americans are there, and the four of them cannot agree who should form the Syrian opposition, who should represent the Syrian opposition.
Actually, almost everyone is there except us.
Well, but we don't belong there. We are not a major player in Syria. We've never been.
He wants us to be.
I know. I don't know why. We've never been a major player in Syria, frankly. It is not an area of great strategic significance for us or for the Middle East. And I'm very dubious about, I frankly would not buy a ticket to the Vienna Conference.
Irvin, should we be
not going to succeed?
Well, I thought Janice was going to buy us a ticket too. Oh, Syria is not a relevant strategic theater for Canada.
It's not a major strategic
as I said, there are
concern.
two conflicts in the world that are happening that are deciding the destiny of the planet. The third one, which we might discuss in another debate, is what happens with a potential Western Asian clash through China and Western powers. But Russia West and the collapse of the Middle East, we have an interest for the planet to be able to form the outcome of one, if not both of those. To be irrelevant in both and to say, well, they're not strategic theaters is a conceit of provinciality, in my view. This is a huge conference. The Vienna process.
This is a conceit of militarism to say that the only way we're relevant is if we have
No. As I said, you use the bombing to get into the larger diplomatic theater.
But that's a lousy ticket into the diplomatic theater.
It's the only way.
They don't need us. I mean, and that's the other thing we need to understand. These are really crowded skies right now. The Russians have joined in. The Americans are there. The Israeli Air Force goes in and out. Well, we actually are now having consultations among the major powers to clear the sky lane so that one plane doesn't bump into the other.
Why would we put forces in the Sahel and military forces in other theaters? Are those more important than Syria?
Well, I think that, first of all, there are real interests. Canada has real interest in Burkina Faso. There's a large Canadian community there, both a mining community and a humanitarian community. Second, nobody else is really deploying with the French. For a small country that wants to make a difference, it's much more strategic to go where the field is not crowded than to push your 6 planes in to insist that's relevance when you've got 200 in the sky.
I don't know, Janice, with the greatest respect, which small country you're talking about. We have Qatar there, we have Italy there, we have Turkey there. Canada is larger in its strategic footprint than all of those,
But
if
not
not
in that-
at
but-
parity.
but not in that part of
But
the
as I
world.
said, we're in neither major conflict. So the idea was that you could at least use our military involvement in the coalition as a fillip to broader engagement. But now we have neither diplomatic resources nor military. So in the end, we reduced to the problem of the last government. We're talking to ourselves, and we can make an excuse about our relative smallness, but that means we're irrelevant in shaping the world for this century.
Let me get you two to focus on what you think our primary fight ought to be. The camera was on me and missed that little exchange between the two of you there, which was very sweet. You put your arm around her.
It was a hug.
It was a hug. No, it was
hug.
very nice. It was very nice. What should our...
I hate to say we're friends, but we are.
I believe it. No, but you disagree, and that's okay. We like that here. Should ISIS be our primary fight rather than, say, Boko Haram, which has had a much more immediate and direct impact on the lives of Canadians than ISIS has? What do you think, Janice?
Well, I think that we have an obligation to be seriously engaged in the fight against the Islamic State. Boko Haram has actually declared its affiliation to the Caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the head of the Islamic State. So where we choose to direct our assets, and here's where I agree, we have to put assets on the table here. It cannot be just talk. It has to be real. But where we choose
We
to
should just end the debate there. I think you've come to my side.
No, we have 70 guys on the ground that we acknowledge right now that are working in Kurdish areas with the Peshmerga.
But if
So
we
it's
want to
not
make a
fair.
contribution, should we be going after Boko Haram as opposed to 6 jets in the air over IS?
Well, there's a real argument to be made that we should because we will be more effective. But actually, I think that stretch where the French army has chosen to deploy, and they are not neophytes in this game. They are in Mauritania, Chad, Niger, Mali, Cameroon, because they recognize that there's a huge area of vulnerability there. We have French-speaking forces. These forces would be deployed, some of them with the French, in parts of French-speaking Africa.
Okay, let me get
we
Irvin
could
on that big
train
question.
I think,
and
again-
accelerate performance and probably make a much bigger difference than our 6 points.
Janice seems to be migrating to my general camp, but what I would say is that the ISIS picture of the general disintegration of the Middle East is a very, very narrow strand of the chaos that's happening. ISIS is just a small phenomenon
Right.
in the general collapse of a century-old order and the collapse of 3 or 4 major states, the critical one of which is Syria, but also Iraq. We have Yemen and, of course, Libya. So we're not just interested in bombing ISIS. We're interested in informing the general future of this continent, of this region.
Is that beyond our ability?
No. We want to have a role in that. We have
Why?
that. We have a role as a country. The question is, how do we play that? How do we get into that?
So
We
I
need
think-
assets at the table.
so I
So
think
it's not
this
just
is-
about bombing Boko Haram or ISIS. The future of Syria is much larger than ISIS, and the Russians and the Americans realize
this is a
that. Yeah.
Canadian conceit. Talk about
Which one?
The conceit is, and it's not only a Canadian conceit, unfortunately. The conceit is that the West, broadly defined, will be crucial in reshaping the Middle East. It is true. This is the end of a 100-year-old order in the Middle East. It's going to take a long time to work its way through. But one thing I'm certain of, it is Arabs who are going to reshape the modern Middle East. It is not Westerners bringing Western perspectives,
God
Western
willing,
values,
that's
and
true.
Western
Yeah.
boots on the ground. And this is going to be a sober time for Westerners who recognize the limits of their influence
Let me ask
and
Irvin.
have a little modesty.
There is a view that there
should
is
have modesty.
There is a view that there is a Muslim world civil war going on right now between Shiites and Sunnis.
We in the West, and Canada included, including through some of the debates we'll have later, have played a poor role, by the way, in giving some of the sparks to that civil
but
war.
the point is
we're
that-
not going to solve it.
Well, that was the question.
Yeah.
Now, if we're not going to solve it, what are we doing there at all?
There is a Western role to be played critically, and I think Janice, having quoted Ash Carter at the start, concedes that there's a Western role, but I don't think it necessarily should be American-led or American-dominated. There's a Western role in boxing in the general logic. In the end, it is amongst Arabs and Persians and Jews to rectify what will be a century-long building process at least. Canada has a role in boxing it in bringing some of our assets to the table. We are a major, major country in our resources, in our landmass, in our political stability, in our relationships.
How about in our diplomacy?
In our diaspora. We're in neither diplomacy nor military are we a major country. That's the very point I'm making. If we withdraw the only military assets we have neither military nor diplomatic assets. So what are we in business for?
Again,
Janice and I, what do we do for a living?
Again, we're not withdrawing all our military assets. We're drawing 6 combat aircrafts. So let's stay real and let's stay focused. That's what we're withdrawing. And I don't think there is anybody in this country, including General Vance, who would say that those 6 aircraft are critical to the outcome of the fight with ISIS.
But if not that, then what?
Right.
What do we do?
I think the real question is, what is a more effective strategic contribution? That's why I made that argument about the Sahel, where we may make a greater difference.
What about between Saudi Arabia and Iran, which has been very tough lately? Do we have a role to play there?
No, we absolutely do not. This is a 30-year-old fight that's been brewing between those two for dominance of the Gulf. Nothing could be more relevant, frankly, than what the Europeans or the Canadians or the Americans think. In fact, Saudi Arabia has thumbed its nose at the United States, which it has a long and deep relationship, and it's really said to Obama, and the Saudi king does not have high regard for President Obama, it's really said to Obama, you don't understand what's at stake here.
He
we will
probably
step
doesn't.
it up.
He probably doesn't. I think Westerners should be very humble in boxing in the conflict. However,
what does it mean,
Janice,
boxing in the conflict?
Boxing in conflict is to create the general parameters within which Arabs and Persians. Of course, we should as major players with assets. Hold on.
We have no
Let me make the point.
capacity
Let
to
me
do it.
make the point. I think Janice is being a little bit unimaginative in terms of Canadian strategy, which is to say, 6 fighters are just a lever for us to expand our broader assets in the region. Precisely diplomatically, not militarily. I'm not pretending that we're going to be a major military force. And by the way, I don't believe in expressive violence, that is to say, ISIS is bad, therefore we should bomb. Or why aren't we bombing? We must believe that ISIS is okay. No, we have no diplomatic relationships, which is unacceptable with key players there.
Let's finish.
But the point, Steve, is if you look at France and Germany in the Russia conflict, that's an example of how Canada could have played a major role in bringing parties together through assets, even if they took a position on the conflict. We've withdrawn our assets, made ourselves irrelevant in both theaters.
Let's finish up on this, because it is possible that a year from now, Hillary Clinton will be president of the United States, or there will be a Republican candidate who is president of the United States. Either way, it could be somebody who is far more muscular vis-a-vis their military approach to that part of the world.
I think it will be.
It probably will be.
Unless it's Bernie Sanders, it will be.
Okay, that's a good point. In which case, does either of you see a specific role for Canada looking forward a year in perhaps restraining whatever America has planned for that part of the world?
Well, you see, that's a very different kind of role than boxing in the conflict in the Middle East, which we have no capacity to do. The reason I quoted Ash Carter's speech is traditionally the audience for Canada has, on all Middle East politics, has been as much Washington as it is the Middle East. Our relationship with the United States is our most important relationship, and it's one we have to take care of.
Do we want to restrain them in any way?
We have often done that. We've been effective in doing it privately, not publicly. But in order to do that, we have to be in the game in some important way.
Last word to
We
Irvin
have to
on
be
that.
in the game. That's very much the point. I think we have a major role. We need relationships with everybody.
Stein and Studin, Part 1. Off to a good start, you two. Thanks very much for this.
Thanks,
You're
Steve.
welcome.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.